You're listening to Nonpartisan Hacks, the politics and policy podcast where we talk about good government from the local level on up. I'm Joel Grenz, a councillor in the city of Parksville.
And I'm Sean Wood, also a Parksville councillor. We're here at the Union of B.C. Municipalities convention in Victoria, surrounded by mayors, councillors, and delegates from every corner of the province.
Actually, we're quite literally surrounded because we're recording this episode just outside where the action's all happening, and we've snagged one of BC's best-known political reporters.
That's right. Our guest today is Rob Shaw, political correspondent with CHEK News, columnist with Business in Vancouver, and co-host of Political Capital. If you follow BC politics, you've definitely read his words or heard his voice.
Rob, welcome to Nonpartisan Hacks.
Well, thanks for having me on. You guys are right in the middle of all the action, right outside the main conference hall at UBCM, where we just had John Rustad's speech. He's getting interviewed live around us, so way to be right in the middle of the thick of it.
Yeah, we're definitely in the middle of all the action. There's literally a live hit going on just around the corner here from, I think, multiple reporters. So thanks for stepping away from the camera and microphone to step into this camera. And, well, no camera, microphone.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be on the show.
Rob, we really appreciate it. I mean, this is a crazy week for you to give us a little bit of time. Eleanor Sturko just did a presser over there. It's been quite a week. I don't know if we can kind of start this off without Rob just giving us kind of your top, 3 things that have happened in the last couple of days that are on your radar.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the first one, Eleanor Sturko getting fired from the BC Conservative Caucus out of the blue. Well, not really out of the blue. When you put it all together, when you sort of take a longer view of things, which I guess is the benefit that I have being stuck in it every day, you start to see how it develops. There's an old line from The Wire. I don't know if you guys watched The Wire, the TV,
awesome
TV show. The Wire, yeah.
Awesome.
And
HBO.
And the line is, if you come for the king, you best not miss.
Yes.
And I think Eleanor Sturko learned that this week by admitting that she was going to organize a caucus vote against John Rustad and was talking to her MLA friends about it. And the leader caught wind. He said he had felt this kind of dissension before and decided to make an example out of her. She's certainly not the only one grumbling about John Rustad, and definitely not the only one organizing to replace him. But she got caught out, and out she went. We staked out the leader's office, a bunch of journalists, until 9:30 at night in the legislature, and kind of watched all the drama unfold. So that was a big one. The new Green leader, Emily Lowen, 25-year-old, abrupt change in direction for the BC Greens, I think. It's going to be a different party going forward, so we watched that. And then all the UBCM stuff, I think, is focused around the issues of crime. That's a big one. The street disorder, the addictions, healthcare, the continued closures and staff shortages. And then a lot of concern this year about Indigenous reconciliation policies that government is either not fully explaining or may have consequences that the government doesn't want to talk about. And that's come up in a bunch of different ways here in the Heritage Conservation Act. So there's a lot going on. And I will just finally say the Premier's not even here.
No.
Premier David Eby
New York City or something, isn't
he? His office sent out a note saying, actually, he's not only going to New York City, he's already there.
Yeah.
And he skipped UBCM. So he's going to be here to deliver a kind of address at the end. But what it functionally means is he wasn't here to talk to any of the politicians.
Yeah.
He didn't do any of the meetings.
He wasn't here for my resolution.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't get to vote on the. He doesn't get to vote anyways.
Yeah,
but
he won't be able to vote or stand up in the microphone for it. But I still want his support.
It seems like an important week if you're premier that you might want to be in town if we're actually in the capital of the province.
Well, it does, but I think his government is so broke, so utterly broke, that his answer to everyone would be no. When they ask for something.
Of course,
And he's really under fire. Like, increasingly you feel that in this UBCM, there's a fundamental question that is kind of circulating around councillors and mayors, which is like, what's this government doing?
Yeah.
Like, what is it here for other than it feels like it's better than the other guys? Other than vote for the NDP because the Conservatives would be worse, which is fine. But then you're in a room full of politicians who have to go back to face at a very real level that you guys know voters in their communities, and they're dealing with actual problems, and they can't take the Premier's kind of abstract discussion of Donald Trump back home and sell it, right? And so I think he skipped that because he doesn't really, like, on healthcare, on infrastructure, on Indigenous reconciliation, on crime. He doesn't really have anything to say on those that would be solutions you two can take home into Parksville and like talk to people about, right? So that's another reason I think it makes sense for him to just bail, just to be out
it's a good point. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, and I'd really love to hear your perspective on having, so this is my third UBCM, but you've been to probably a few more than that, and also have been watching this over the years. But just in the 3 years from the first one to this one that I went to, I've really noticed a shift in the kind of feeling in the room around a bunch of these issues. The first year we had a presentation from staff from the Ministry of Health and Dr. Bonnie Henry about their decriminalization program, and I was going to that session expecting to get some good data and facts and information to back up the policy, which I was a little bit disappointed on. I didn't get that from that session, but there was a wide support I felt in the room for trying out that policy. And then you come to this year, and I was in a different session around the same issue of drug addiction, street disorder, and all that, and definitely a change in that. And then we had the Save Our Streets rally that happened outside the legislature. So I've noticed a big shift in that. Can you speak at all about the shifts that you see in the mood of these conventions and just sort of local governments over the years, and how that all works?
Well, one of the big shifts, I think, is that there's, as you both know, an election coming up at the local level within the next year. And so this won't be the last UBCM. I think there's one more.
But that one will be like in the midst of election
chaos. So you can feel that tension from municipal leaders who are wanting to emerge with something, right? Something that they can point to is that they made progress down here, meeting with politicians. But also, I think Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krogh put it pretty well, where he said, we've just sort of exhausted the well of public sympathy on several issues, and that what you hear from mayors who would never have said this before is that there's such a small number of people causing such an intense amount of disorder in the communities that people are just fed up and that they are angry. And that anger we see playing out federally. We see it in the United States in a totally different way, but you feel voter discontent, the economy, the uncertainty, the cost of living, the 12-hour wait if you're sick to get into an ER, it all coalesces into a really grumpy room of people because people themselves, I think, are grumpy, and it. That's the mood that I've sort of picked up. And we're not really talking about a lot of policy here because I don't think the questions are so complex. How do we solve a healthcare staffing shortage? Money. But even if we threw money at it, where do the people come from? Are we poaching them from another province? Probably. Are we taking them from the U.S.? Can we accredit them fast enough? If we do take them, what are the problems with that? The school that is going to be built for doctors is going to take years. How do you get them into rural communities when they all want to drink lattes in downtown Vancouver? What happens with the new pay model that is like the longitudinal pay model that we put in place so that family doctors would have clinics, but it's moved them out of hospitals, and now the hospitals want them back, and our system poaches with these are enormously complex issues that even if you just showed up with a bag full of cash, you couldn't solve them, right? And what do we do with involuntary care? Do we start sweeping the streets and picking people up and holding them against their will in a sanitarium? Like that is fraught with legal peril and challenges and constitutional rights. So I think that's part of the frustration that people feel is that the problems are so immense. The government hasn't got a clear way through them. And even though we are massively in debt to the most record amount that we have ever been in, none of that money has made anything better. No. In fact, it feels like we're just barely hanging on the edge of a cliff. And that I think that frustration sort of hitting the provincial government right in the face.
And it feels like a bit of a lack of a clear vision of where the province should be heading and what kind of future we want to set up in BC, and maybe there's disagreement from the local level. We have our own ideas about that, and provincially, but it feels like there's a kind of like a lack of direction that's happening right now, and so hopefully some leadership will step up on that.
Well, I mean, maybe. I think we'll be in that part of the cycle where after the next municipal elections, the folks who win will have a more current mandate than the premier.
Of course,
They will have been elected on issues that people care about, and they will have more leverage against a premier who's going to be nearing the end of possibly not only his mandate, but his career, depending on how things go in the next little while. And we could have a different opposition league. So you're going to have you're going to have more pressure on the NDP government. This is going to be the worst next few years that the NDP government has ever faced since John Horgan took power. And as we heard in one of the economic presentations from a national bank expert, like we're into the 90s era of kind of the NDP sort of like fiscal situation. So, and that coalesced into the wheels falling off the bus and the bus skidding into the ditch and the ditch burning on fire and then someone dropped a bomb on the ditch. Like it just is a mess.
And then a ferry drove over, a fast cat drove over it.
So, the casino fell on it. But like there's a lot coming at us from all sorts of different angles and it's a very fascinating time. I'm sure you guys feel it yourself, right? It's just people like they have what look like simple problems. Why is this tent encampment here? Why can't I afford my rent? Why is the groceries so expensive? Why is the health clinic, the walk-in clinic closed and no one else here can see me? But they're so complicated and expensive and difficult to solve, right? So
you spoke about leverage local governments, Rob, and you've seen these UBCM conventions for years. You've seen mayors and councillors get together on the steps of the legislature. What have you seen works for leverage for local governments, if anything, really, when you're down here in Victoria?
Yeah, the great advantage of UBCM is strength in numbers, right?
Yeah.
Because when you are talking to the government by yourself, the first instinct from the government is some kid in short pants in the communications office in the basement is going to turn around and write some lines to call you a fearmonger.
Sure, yeah.
You're out of touch, kind of thing. And Leonard Krogh, to his credit, he got hit with that pretty early on when he was one of the first ones speaking about decriminalization.
Sure, yeah.
He was saying, look, we have a pharmacy and safe supply that literally there are, prescription bottles found on the ground. And the government's first response was stop fearmongering. Yeah. And it took him and Brad West and all of these people to come together. And then when you end up with what happened this week with the Save Our Streets rally on the front of the legislature with politicians across the ideological spectrum standing together in front of the Premier's window and saying, we all voted different ways.
He's in New York, though.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But we agree on that you got to do this. Yes. You've boxed government into a corner, right? And I think very similarly on the Heritage Conservation Act, it would have been easy for one or two mayors to come out and say, I have concerns about this, and then the government would attack them personally. But to have that UBCM president stand in front of the room, although the government did attack her personally too, but to say that we want that. So that's the strength in numbers, the unity. The government will tell you that they like it when politicians show up with solutions.
Sure.
Which is fair, as long as the solutions don't cost any money.
Of course.
And don't require government to do anything.
Sure.
Like change a policy or a law.
Sure.
Then they're great solutions.
Yeah, sure.
Free
the formula's there.
Yes.
Easy.
And the other thing that always gives some leverage to politicians is your willingness to stand with the government to validate their things. Sure. So if they do something you want, or half of something you want, or a quarter of something you want, or nothing that you want, but you feel like maybe they'll do it next time, and you go stand beside the minister of whatever and smile through the whole thing and co-op and say a couple things, that builds you the capital to get something the next
the political
time.
capital.
Not everyone wants to do that, though. Because
you didn't pick that up. You said political capital. You got it.
But that's a tough one for people to do, too. So, like the most common frustration you hear here is that someone has deeply researched an issue in their community that intersects with the province, and they've come down here with 17 pages of well-researched policy to be changed. And they're hit with this wall of inertia and red tape and risk aversion and bureaucrats and disinterested ministers, and it goes nowhere, right? And that just repeats itself again and again until it builds to that crisis where more than one mayor gets together and pounds the government until they move, which is...
Joel and I often talk about backlash, and if we think about, decriminalization or the Heritage Act, if you can see backlash coming from a policy, I think that would save a lot of problems down the road. If you're like, hey, if we do this, what could the backlash be?
Right.
Well, but you also have to reach out to the people most likely to lash back and say, like, we're looking to bring this in, and can we address your concerns and all that before we move on with our policy? And we don't see enough of that. And the other thing I think we see from the local government perspective, both of us are trying to stick to the nonpartisan thing and not wear colors on our sleeve when we're speaking to provincial counterparts. But often the reaction that we get, I think, is a political one. So when we're asking for some policy change, it's immediately seen through some kind of political lens of someone winning or losing on the issue from the provincial side. And I've spoken to other people in the in the councillor community, the local government community here at this convention, about how they've asked to have something addressed in their community around some provincial policy, and then they're immediately sort of treated like it's a political football on that issue, and we're just trying to raise it like we just want to come to a solution here.
Yeah.
And so the lens is always like this political one, and who's winning and who's losing, and that's a real frustration for us.
And sometimes it's because local politicians make very good provincial politicians, and so someone will have run and be sitting on council from the other party that didn't win or whatever, and then immediately the government gets its back up and is like, we just defeated that person, why are we going to... But also, they do tend to, depending on where you live, put some premium on the idea that if they change a thing in a riding, it might help them in the next election.
Sure, yeah.
But we have such a deep rural-urban divide in BC now that there are areas of the province that aren't heard at all in this government. Anything out of Metro Vancouver, it just falls off a cliff. And that's a massive problem.
Why is it that we have that right now? Like you say, we have that urban-rural divide right now. Why is that worse now? Like
yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. I think partly... it coalesced around some environmental policies, and a lot of the most strident environmental policies of the early New Democrat government were sort of urban-based. Let's not cut trees down. Let's protect old growth. Let's oppose the fracking and natural gas kind of development, and we're not sure about LNG. You know, like it is a problem, and you'll feel it in Victoria. You know that Victoria's not a real city in some ways. You know, it doesn't cut anything down, dig anything up, produce any widgets. It exists. It existed during COVID because it's like a knowledge economy. It just is a barnacle on the whale of the provincial government. And it just exists. But you get out of here into a community that survives on fishing or mining or logging. And those policies don't align with the provincial government, which is more focused on the environmental. And so I think that has widened. Rural British Columbia doesn't see itself and its industries and its jobs reflected in the government, and it is kind of flipped where we were in the late stage Liberal government, which was based out of Kelowna and kind of talking about LNG but couldn't win the suburbs. And the electoral map now is you can lose everywhere else in the province, but if you win Surrey and most of the suburbs, you form government. And then that's where governments, so I don't know how we get around that other than the shifts that we're feeling right now, especially federally, where a New Democrat Party has lost its working base. It used to be the union halls, the forestry mills, the towns like Nanaimo. And this government is suffering from it too. And it is kind of become the urban elite, the political science professor and the,
academics,
like the downtown east side activist and the kind and like that sort of group. And, that pushes them even further away. So there's a path for the different parties to address that. I just don't think the other part, I guess, which is a bigger discussion, is that people aren't willing to compromise anymore, just in a kind of general political sense.
Meet in the middle and
they
work
entrench, right? And so it's hard in a party to say we want to protect the environment, but we also want to cut down trees. We want to protect old growth, but we want to increase the amount of timber supply. We want we want to do value adding, but we also have to governments get caught up in some of that, and their base doesn't like it, and they just kind of fall apart. So,
well, and again, it's a bit of a challenge of leadership, right? Like when you're a leader, your job is to stand up and do the right thing, and sometimes have to say no to the people that are your supporters on certain issues.
It's harder to do that the longer a government goes, right? John Horgan's memoir, which is coming out, talks about LNG being like his toughest decision, and Site C.
I was going to say Site C was up there too. Yeah.
John Horgan my colleague Vaughn Palmer still has the photo of him holding a sign that says Site C sucks. Right? And so they
approved it.
But he was early enough in his mandate that he could craft the compromise.
Yes.
It's much harder to compromise with this government now. It's reversed itself on almost everything, at least once, possibly twice. And in some cases, it hasn't followed through on what it said it was going to do. And so it's so, it's just kind of drifting, right? And then that's why compromise. And you look with the Greens right now too. The Greens rejected in their leadership election a compromise position,
Yeah.
a middle road position,
Yeah.
because party base doesn't want to compromise in any of the parties. They have their values, they're active, they strongly believe in something, they want their leaders to do this, and they pull the Conservatives to the right, and they pull the Greens to the left, and they pull, and that doesn't necessarily align with what voters want, but 1,500 members in a party select the leader, and 5 million voters go to cast their ballot, and the two things don't always align for compromise either.
Well, and adding your layer of urban-rural that you bring up, which is a very good one to bring up because I think that's a key fissure in BC, is that the Green Party has now decided that it's going to be a more urban party. That's what it sure looks like to me with this choice. The other choice that was the candidate came from a more rural area and would have brought more of that perspective.
Yeah, and definitely a more activist, environmental, opposition kind of party. You know, I think. Well, we can debate whether the other way would have been better. Jonathan Kerr's idea of the Greens already have the climate file locked down. Let's move into healthcare and housing, and the Greens, and that might be something that would win them votes in the election, but it didn't move the membership
in the leadership race.
Yeah.
And he never got to the election. When we see that same fight playing out federally with the Conservatives, your leader, Pierre Poilievre, doesn't win, and immediately everyone's like, well, he's got to go further right, because that's what the members want, right? They want him, but he's trying to hold back because he knows what the general population wants.
Yeah.
And
wasn't true blue enough and then didn't get
which
the vote.
is the wrong way to go, right?
Yeah.
But party members are the most passionate, ideological, Puritan, bathwater drinking people you can possibly get, right? And because they volunteer their time, they believe deeply in the party and the cause, and they don't see the world like normal voters see
Idealistic.
it.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, we wouldn't want to let you go without asking a little bit about the craft that you craft. I don't know what
beer.
Craft beer. Well, let's talk about that too. The reporter's craft,
right?
Because you have to balance the relationship aspect in your work between because you want to have good relationships with the people that come here to Victoria to represent the province, but you also report on them. And so, how do you strike that balance between kind of getting on the inside on things and revealing some stuff safely, so that you don't kind of burn the bridges with those relationships?
Ask the tough questions without burning the bridges.
Honestly, it's a job where you are constantly under attack every day. Constantly under attack in an overt way for people who go after you on social media or send you notes or complain to your bosses, and then in a kind of covert way, the systems that slowly close in around you, the government making it harder to get information, limiting you to 2 questions, holding events that you can't go to, not providing, there's that system too. And then, yes, you are kind of forming relationships with people, but you have to be careful about it because you're ultimately holding them to account too.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit like covering the Canucks inside the Canucks locker room, and you point out that, so-and-so had a horrible game, and then you go in and see them, 30 years later, and they've read it, and they're like, they come at you, right? So, but I will say, it, like, to David Eby's credit, because he's a lawyer, I think he understands the sort of adversarial nature of it.
Yeah.
How lawyers in courtrooms refer to each other as my friend.
Right.
And they argue, and the House is set up that way. You argue kind of in the third person and you speak through a chair. There is part of that, but man, it is increasingly with social media, it is tough because anonymous people can get direct access to you and say the worst things. And here's a meme that someone emails me of me being hanged. And you're like,
great.
That's not cool.
Yeah,
here's
thanks.
a meme, someone puts a dunce hat on your head and sends it around, and you're like, what? And
I mean, it's better than being hanged.
It
Take a
is.
dunce hat over that.
It is, but they have direct access to you.
Yeah.
It hits you, right? And that part is hard. So
Well, and it's such a critical role in our society, and it's a shame that that's how things are headed, and we're seeing it around the world really declining. But without the people who do ask those questions and don't have to pay for the access and just get the access because it's for all of us that you get the access. So it's a real challenge.
Well, paying for it is a whole other thing. Like, I don't know. You guys are dealing with this, but I once did a summer internship at the Parksville Qualicum Beach News.
Sure, yeah.
All right.
And the Nanaimo Bulletin.
Represent.
The Lady Smith Chronicle. The Comox Valley Record.
Are those all black press, I guess?
They were.
Okay, yeah.
I think some of them still are. Some of them don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
The Nanaimo Bulletin, which is still around.
Yeah.
And Nanaimo Daily News, which is gone, and the ability for people to pay for what is a community resource, and then the ability to produce something that people want to pay for too.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of folks here about the declining media landscape and a sort of sense that people still wanted what wasn't hard news. They want you to come take a picture of the high school soccer team that won so that their grandma can see the picture in the paper, right? They want to see themselves reflected. They don't just, and that's it's harder to do that with fewer resources too. So.
Ribbon cuttings and...
like little things that make your community go, right? And but will you pay for it?
Yeah.
when you can go to the Facebook forum and see someone who walked past, snap a photo with their iPhone, and it's like...
Well, Rob, you're still doing really great reporting, and sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone. We used to have in newspapers, TV, there was a good monetization model for that stuff, and that seems to be a little bit trickier these days. You have a podcast, a video podcast, part of CHEK News, Political Capital, and so that's kind of breaching or kind of breaking out of the traditional TV.
It is an interesting thing to do because it goes on YouTube, and then it is a podcast, but it's also a TV show, and it's kind of it's sort of
multimedia,
contorting itself into all three formats, and sometimes it doesn't quite fit into all of them. Like you'll do a 22-minute TV show, but it's not a long enough podcast, right? If someone wants to run and they want to jog with it, so you add on more podcast stuff, but it's too long for YouTube, and you're just like,
if you want to catch the rest of this, then check it out.
You sort of bounce around.
Switching between different modalities, right? Like I'm on YouTube for this part, and on podcast for that, and CHEK News for that.
Just like that, the monkey that has the foot for the drums and is also playing the accordion at the same time, while also it's got the harmonica going. So it's just like you're. But that's the way it works. I'm fortunate to be able to do it. I'm an island kid who grew up watching CHEK, and I grew up reading the Times Colonist and the Ladysmith Chronicle, and grew up in Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Daily News. And so I got to write for all those places, and I got to appear on all those things. And so in that sense, you get it's been very fulfilling to chase that dream. And I didn't know that the dream involved running over a rope bridge that is collapsing behind you, which is the media landscape when I was starting off. But I still would have done it, I think.
Sure.
And my brother, he's the younger, slimmer, more successful Shaw son. He went on to do law.
Okay.
So I think to my family, I'm a little bit like that sort of, the kid who grew up to do community theater. But I found it very rewarding, and the people I got to meet, and such a unique, interesting job. You guys know this from what you're doing, like the ability to talk to people, and meet them, and have a reason to talk to them, and ask them questions that you otherwise wouldn't ask them, and hear them. Like it's a fulfilling thing, right? Like and share it with people, and then someone will come up to you and be like, "I really like that."
Yeah, and it's an essential, important role in society. I mean, there's lawyers, of course, we need lawyers, but reporters, we need reporters as well. To be down here in this craziness where there's so many news stories every day, and you need Vaughn Palmer, you need yourself, you need Keith Baldry's of the world to cover it, to talk about the stories that are happening down here.
And I'm lucky to have benefited from working under them. I did work with Vaughn Palmer at the Vancouver Sun, and I worked with Les Lane at the Times Colonist. And so to learn a little bit of that, the long game, put things into context and perspective is one of the most valuable things you can do. Is that, where did you get pulled in so many different directions every day, but what's the thread? Where have we talked about this before? What was the promise in the election? What did the last government do? What did this, and to put that together in an information overload age is kind of, I think, the value for it. So I've been lucky that way.
I think all of us are lucky too in BC. We're very fortunate to have such institutional knowledge that is tracking through those names that you just listed there, and then through to yourself and continuing on. It's so important for me. I mean, I popped into the political scene at a certain point in time, and I don't understand some of the backstory on this stuff. One of the things I try not to do when at the local government level is try to avoid making the same mistakes that have already been tried. But I don't know always what's been tried. So that's where it's so critical what you and those names that you just listed are doing, and it's so much appreciated. And that you're willing to have a conversation with us too is very much appreciated.
Yeah, we can't thank you enough.
I like what you guys are doing. I think one of the things that is important to do increasingly is humanize politicians.
Yes.
In a day and age when social media
dehumanizes,
sure. and people, the election campaigns are so vicious, and even municipally now we're moving towards more of a slate party thing. That unfortunately increases the attacks. That the more we can do to show people that you can A, be a politician, and B, even if you don't know these politicians, they're real people, and you can talk to them is a thing. And I know it's tough in politics because everyone's so cynical. Sometimes I try to do stories on, just you spend a day with a politician and you'll get this feedback as you talk about their family and who they are and why they're doing this. You'll get this immediate feedback from all the people who hate them. Why didn't you pin them down? And why didn't you point out that 7 years ago they cut funding for the disability bus pass program? And you're like, listen, I'm just trying to do something a little different. You may hate this person, but they're also a person,
yes,
right?
Of course.
So they're just a person from the community, just like you. It's a person in your neighborhood, like the Sesame Street song. It's a person in the neighborhood. Is just there's someone delivering the mail. There's someone representing the community in political office. We're all just humans that are just trying to do a job in the community. And people definitely lose sight of that and treat it like you were saying Canucks. They treat it like it's a sports team or something and ride or die with that team. That's not how this works. We all lose. If that person loses, we all lose as a society. So let's try to make sure that we're all doing everything we can, and also to listen to what's happening in the news and pay attention to what's going on. And we have a responsibility there as well. So listen to your show, people. Listen to Rob Shaw.
Or listen to people you don't even like, too, right? I mean, we are...
Where are they coming from?
We're in such an age that you can only consume the things that validate how you feel.
Sure,
If you want to feel a certain way, you just keep the Google News search down until you find that opinion that you agree with.
Well, and the Google News search is actually going to feed you more stuff too, because algorithmically, same social media, Google News feed. Oh, you looked at this last time? Well, here's more of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Now I'm not challenged ever in my thinking.
So I think the podcast format's a good one, to talk to people and hear them. And people, I like how we've kind of gone back to that sort of radio format.
Yes, this is radio.
Yeah, we're just doing an on-demand, in-depth radio without commercials. And that's neat. I think people consume it in different ways when they're exercising or they're in their car.
Yes.
To go all the way back to even now as we're moving radios from cars, we're putting radios back in a different
putting
way.
back through a different device.
And you reach them, right?
Yeah.
And you talk to them and they relate to you. And I think that's good. I think that's a good way to do it. You're filling a void that exists, right?
And people's BS meters are pretty good, and this hopefully feels very real conversation. We're just people, sitting down and talking about stuff. And we've already received feedback about our podcast that it feels very real and not too scripted.
Yeah.
And people appreciate that, and that breaks away from a lot of the kind of misinformation, disinformation agendas that are out there on social media. And we're really hoping that this is, and we appreciate your time today, that this feels real to the people, to their ears, and that could be the currency, is what I think is coming, is the currency of authenticity, which is hard to duplicate.
Individual authenticity. The brands have all changed, but you might get to know someone who you trust and you follow their podcast and you read their stuff.
Yes.
And you go to their Substack or whatever. But authenticity is the magic sauce in politics.
Yeah.
John Horgan had it. And it's the magic sauce in media somehow. I don't know how it's made. Probably there's a path of a lot of bad jokes somewhere in there, and a willingness to laugh at yourself, I think, is probably the things that contribute to it. But
and you don't always have to pay for the jokes.
No, not even at $165 an hour for the comedian speechwriter.
we pay for our own jokes here, this podcast, and Rob Shaw. One final thing before we let you go is there anything that you've learned from attending all these various events and scrums and everything as regards local government that you would pass along to those people who might be thinking of running in the next municipal election or re-electing themselves or going for re-election? Any thoughts or advice around how they should carry themselves aside from the getting elected part?
Yeah, well, people get into politics for all sorts of different reasons, and they have a lot of strong opinions, but the most successful ones I have seen focus on the basics.
Sure.
You need to deliver the basic services. Yeah. And people have lost interest, I feel, and I'm in Victoria where this happens all the time, and listening to their councillors talk about international conflicts that they have no control over and things like that. And so I think, the path to success is a very sort of Brad West model in Port Coquitlam of is the garbage picked up? Can you get your building permit?
Toilet flushes.
Is the toilet flushes and the fire department's there to respond? That's what people elected you to do.
Yeah.
And yes, you can go and pass resolutions to write a letter to the province to, do something and
international war or something.
Wars, but that doesn't. I don't I'm not sure that's the path to success kind of thing.
Stay in your lane a little bit. Make sure your lane's taken care of before you go outside of your lane.
It's not glamorous. You guys don't have a glamorous job sometimes, making sure that the garbage is collected in the recycle. But it's important, right? People want that.
Potholes are very glamorous, aren't they?
That's the job.
Them exciting.
They are.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the provincial, policy isn't that glamorous either, because they're stuck with, social housing, healthcare, and things like that. And but the practical stuff matters, and the day-to-day stuff matters, and making sure your street is plowed when it snows once a year. People get upset about, and that's a real. People like that, I think. So,
Rob, thank you so much for making time for us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to let you get back to your very busy day down here in Victoria.
Yeah, and for our listeners, you can find Rob's reporting on CHEK News, his columns in Business in Vancouver, and his podcast, Political Capital, on YouTube, other places as well, everywhere you get your podcasts.
And that's a wrap on episode 12 of Nonpartisan Hacks. We'd love to hear what you think. If you got a guest suggestion, good government story, or a topic idea, drop us a line at nonpartisanhacks.com.
And until next time, take care of yourself and your community.